Hi, my name's Todd. I'm a Python developer at PsychoPy, and in this video I'm going to show you around what's changed in version 2020.2. So the chances are one of the first things you'll notice is that in 2020.2 we have a whole new look. So let's take a look now. If we open up Psychopy, you can immediately see that we've got a new splash screen, and in the builder, coder and runner view, all of the kind of panels and things that make up the interface, they've all got this kind of nice flat structure which just looks a bit more modern. And we also have new icons for all of the buttons up at the top here and all the components down the side here. So if we open up a demo, let's unpack the BART demo. You can see this also carries through to the interface for the builder view. And if we then compile this and look in Coda, you can see we've got a whole new kind of style for the text with different colors. And one of the kind of big things that happens with this is that we now have different themes. So if we switch to Psychopay Dark, which is one of the ones that comes with the 2020.2 install. Now this is one that I think a lot of coders have probably been looking forward to. This basically means that if you're working for a long period of time, there's not quite so much light in your face, so it makes it a bit more comfortable to do more long-term coding projects. Now as you can see, different themes will have kind of different ways of doing the colours. So if you were particularly fond of how Psychopay used to look, you could switch to the classic theme, so this looks much more like the old Coda view. And it also has the old icons in classic mode. We also have minimal mode, which is, uses as fewer colours as possible, so it's just red, white and grey. All of these themes come in light and dark. There's also high vis mode, which is great if you have a kind of visual impairment and you need things to be really high contrast in order to see them. And then we also have a GitHub theme, which styles everything to look sort of basically like the GitHub text editor. If you want to have a go at making your own themes, you're more than welcome to. If you click here on the Open Theme folder, you can see all of the themes where they're stored on the computer. Now these are the color specification for the theme as a whole. You can also specify different colors for the app, so this will change things like what color are the ribbons at the top of all the panels, what color are the background for the flow panel, that kind of thing. So this is definitely a kind of high level feature, but it's something that you can have a play with now, and you're more than welcome to. So while we're on the topic of interface changes, there are a couple of minor tweaks that we've made. So the run button is now kind of split in two. The reason for this is that when we introduced the runner view, a lot of people seem to kind of miss the old way of doing things where you would just press run on builder or coder and it would run the experiment directly. So in addition to having a button which sends the experiment to the runner, sorry, let's just open a BART task first. We now have a button which will directly run the experiment. So let's just cancel out of this. We also have this new item on the top menu, window. This is to make it a bit easier to switch between coder, builder, runner, now that we have three windows. So you can see I've switched to the coder view that I had open, switched to the runner view, and if I close any of these, so let's close coder, on all of the others, you can see it'll now be grayed out, and that's a BART task that I had open earlier. If I wanted to open a new window, you can just choose to open a new builder, a new coder, a new runner. So if I do that, there's a new coder view, and you can cycle between them by using Control and L. So that just makes it a lot more easy to navigate. Moving over to the coder view now, we have some other interface changes there. So we now have on the left hand side this panel for structure and a file browser. So the file browser is pretty straightforward. It's what it says on the tin. It's kind of just a docked alternative to having a Windows Explorer window open in the background. The structure window, that will essentially parse your code and create a hierarchical structure to make it easier to see how it's laid out. Now, with a Psychopy experiment that's been compiled from the builder view, this structure should be pretty much flat. We generally try to make these as simple as possible to make them understandable to novice coders. However, if we open up a more complex file, let's go into the Psychopy files themselves, Psychopy app, and let's just pick one of these at random. Let's do standout rich. So these are more complex Python files, so they have classes and methods written into them. And you can see the structure view shows this class and then the methods within it. So this is quite a common thing in coding IDEs, and as a coder, this is super useful. So I'm quite excited to have this feature. This was courtesy of Matthew Keatone, did a lot of work on this, so thank you to Matthew. While having a look around the coder view, another of the improvements in the latest version is that we now have handling for JavaScript and C in the coder view. So let's go back to the BART task, the HTML for it. So let's open this JavaScript file. Now the structure window doesn't work for JavaScript yet, that is a Python thing. However, you can see we have styling for comments, for keywords like const and function and return, and for kind of booleans, and for strings. So that's now all in JavaScript as well. So basically just making coder view a much more kind of powerful coding IDE. So next up we have a couple of new components that have been added in 2020.2. One of the most hotly anticipated is the text box component. So previously what was quite common was for people to create a text component, create a keyboard component, and then create a code component which linked them together so that anything typed in the keyboard component would be shown in the text component. The text box essentially does all this for you now. So if we just click it to editable, what this means is that this now specifies the kind of starting text of a text input field. And the contents of that text input will be stored in your final data file. Using the text box component, we were then able to add a form component. Now, Becca will probably be making a tutorial on this at some point, so I won't go into too much detail about specifically how you specify the colors and size and that kind of thing for each item. But essentially, you create a CSV file or any kind of Excel table that specifies all of the items in your questionnaire, similar to how we currently do condition files for loops. And then you can set the kind of appearance, size, position of the component itself. So currently the styles are handled by kind of presets. So we have light and dark, but if anyone's interested in contributing, this is an open source project. So of course, we're perfectly happy for you to add your own styles. And if there are any that are particularly good, feel free to drop in a pull request. So one of the other things that's been added is support for emotive EEG. So you can mark a period of EEG using the marker component, and you can also initialize the emotive device by using this component here. Another change to how a particular component works is the code component. So one thing you might notice, we now have a new tab here, before experiment. So the begin experiment tab, anything that you put into this tab will go into the code just after the window is created. The before experiment, that goes into the code before the window is created. So begin experiment is a good place for anything that requires there to be a window. So if you're changing the color of the window at the beginning of the experiment, for example, that would go in begin experiment. But if you wanted to change anything before the window is created, like importing packages, setting global variables, particularly in JavaScript, because before experiment in JavaScript will be in the global namespace for any JavaScript developers watching. So this is kind of just a useful way to have a bit more control over where the code gets put in your experiment. A few things to be aware of in terms of compatibility. We no longer support Python 2.7. The reason being that a lot of the functionality that is added in this version relies on the kind of increased functionality of Python 3. We are also now running the app in the latest version of WX. If you're installing from the compiled exe file on the website, that shouldn't be an issue. The newest version of WX is compiled in that file. However, if you're pulling down from GitHub and running Psychopy that way, just a warning, you may need to update your version of WX. Psychopay is now also verified on Mac and Windows, so you'll not get any more of those error messages saying, are you sure you want to install this program, unknown developer, all that kind of stuff. It should just accept, yes, Psychopay is a thing, we know them, they've sent in all the paperwork, it's all good. So that's a great bit of news. Okay, so thank you for watching. There's a lot of changes that I didn't go into in this video. You can find a full list of all of the changes that have happened in the latest version by following the link in the description down below. And we are hoping to put out one of these videos every major release. So this is, PsychoPy 2020.1, 2020.2, but not the minor bug fixes in between. So hopefully stay tuned, and I'll see you when the next version comes out. Okay, thanks for watching.